Thank you for joining us for our very first Woman in Conservation lecture series. My name is Kaylee. I'm the Utah Conservation Program Supervisor at Kentucky, many of you do. And many of you know Mary Wykstra as the founder and director of Action for Cheetah Kenya. Some of you know Mary as a Hogle employee. So in 1989, Mary came here after her degree in zoology from Michigan State University. Over the next decade, Mary worked her way up to exhibits curator. And in 2001, with Swiss support, she went over to Madagascar and Libya. The story has it, within weeks, perhaps days from returning, Mary sat down with the CEO. He looked in her eyes. I know. I know. And she went back and she worked for Cheetah Conservation Fund for many years, alongside getting her master's from Yale. So powerhouse over here. And then in 2007, Mary founded Action for Cheetah Kenya to secure the future of these incredible animals. So I'm going to roll straight over to Mary, if she can tell you about this incredible program far better than I can. So if you'd like to give a big round of applause.
The ankle is the top.
Okay. So thanks everybody for coming, especially some of my old friends that I haven't seen in such a long time. Very nice to meet all the new friends, a lot of new faces that I've not seen before. I'm really excited to share with you and to help launch off your renewal of your conservation talks. I've had the same situation in lots of the zoos that I've been to so far, that they're just beginning to have people come and speak again. So I'm really honored that I was accepted to be able to come back and talk to you all. Like she said, I founded this Action for Cheetahs in Kenya project, co-founded with Dr. Lori Marker, who was my boss and then continues to give us support. We also work very closely with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, or with the Kenya Wildlife Service. Sorry, can't do two things at once, never have been able to. So very closely with the Kenya Wildlife Service, who are the wildlife authorities in Kenya, and who have also been very supportive of our efforts, and us very supportive of making sure that we supply information to the government to be able to make decisions on conservation management. So just to kind of give a little bit of background of the things that we have accomplished, the cheetahs are declining at a very rapid rate of about 2% annually. And those of us who are doing conservation efforts are trying to slow down and halt that decline. And at the end, if people have some questions about the reintroduction of cheetahs and what's happening with the India program, I can talk a little bit more about my knowledge of that. I'm not a part of it, but I follow it and communicate with people who are. So the stronghold for cheetahs is in Africa, with the tiny little population that still exists in India, or sorry, in Iran, and the potential reintroduction of cheetahs into India. But you can see the gray parts here is where cheetahs actually had been located in the past, and the red is where we know that they do still exist. So we're based here. Does this have a pointer? No. We're based here in the central part of Eastern Africa, which is where that big red area is. The other stronghold for cheetahs is Namibia and Botswana, and a little bit down into South Africa. The majority of the actual dense population of cheetahs is down still in South Africa, where there's a lot of big open spaces and a lower population of humans. And then what we are to the central part of Eastern Africa is really essential for all of the transboundary migratory routes for most animals, and cheetahs included, for how they have with cross-boundary. In 2007, we held, together with cheetah experts from all over the continent, a series of AZA-supported conservation meetings that helped us to give guidelines to programs like mine as to what direction we needed to follow and what gaps there were in the conservation of cheetahs. And in those meetings, we identified the main threats to the cheetah population, with the top 3 being the ones that we were focused on, with a little bit of additional things going down into the rest. So I'm going to go into a little bit about what we've been doing to address these threats. And as a matter of fact, one of the things I'm missing next week is that the AZA, Safe People, and all of the cheetah experts from East Africa are gathering together in Kenya next weekend, or early next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, to review this plan and to take things like our program have, the data that our program has been collecting and the work that we've been doing, and to reevaluate what is the next 10-year plan going to look like. So taking this as our roadmap of what we did to set up our programs in Kenya and how we were working with this whole international effort is where we're going. So a little bit of what's been happening in the past few years have kind of turned everything a little upside down. This is locusts that are flying in early 2020, just before the pandemic hit. We had a severe locust infestation in most of Eastern Africa. And this is what it looked like for almost 2 months straight, right outside of our study accommodation. So this, in addition to starting with the flood, which the high moisture content is what actually made the locusts have such an overpopulation, and the burst in their hatchings is what allowed the locusts to invade. And then after the locusts finished, not only did they degrade the landscape, but also, I'm going to start dancing Distemper. Oh, perfect. Also, we've had, since then, we've been in an extended drought. We are in a really severe, almost 4-year now drought since the invasion of the locusts started. So all of the climate change things have really caused us to not just address the biology of the cheetah, but we have to focus on the ecology and the human part of cheetah conservation as well. So what we did to start out with is we said we're more than just cheetahs. We're all about carnivores. There's a lot of other good carnivore projects out there that don't have a base into which they can start their programs. We needed to get our staff being paid legally. We had to get them on health insurance and all of the things that you legally need to do. We needed to make sure that our finances were in such a way that people wanted to invest into our program. So we registered our own organization, which is called Carnivores, Livelihoods, and Landscapes. And Action for Cheetahs in Kenya was the first research project under call. And the cool crafts, which some of you have already indulged a little bit, and hopefully everybody will. The cool crafts is kind of the financial backing part to look at sustainable income, not just for our project, but for the communities that we work with. And then the third project joined us in 2017, which is called the Mara Cheetah Project. We were already working in collaboration with Elena, the director of that program, but we strengthened our relationship by her joining call. A big part of our program that I'll get into a little bit is what we're doing with National Cheetah Survey. And this is our scat detection dogs. And I know you guys have highlighted dogs in some of your summer activities here. And these dogs have the most amazing noses and personalities that exist in the world. And they have been trained to find cheetah poop. The black dog that is on your right is Maddie. Maddie has found over 400 cheetah poops. Wow. And his longest distance, when he gave us an indication that he was smelling something and he went running in a direction that we couldn't stop him, he went 700 meters, which is almost a kilometer away. This other one, Percy, is a little bit younger. She's only 2 years old, so she hasn't done official field work yet. Warrior was the partner to Maddie that was working together with us when Maddie found so many scats. And Warrior and Maddie together were the launch of our project with detection dogs. In order to do this project, we also have to make sure that we're doing it sustainably for the sake of the health of the dogs. So, and also setting them up for success with wind and temperature. So what Tim in the middle here is doing is he's registering what the temperature, the wind speed, the wind direction, so that we know how to do the search. So over the past mainly 5 years, we've developed this program of using dogs as a non-invasive tool to be able to find the cheetah poop. From the cheetah poop, we then look at health status. We look at the parasites. We look at any stress indicators that are in the stress hormones. We look at diet and how frequently the dogs, how frequently the cheetahs might be taking livestock in their diet. What are the main prey base that they have, and is there enough of those prey in the ecosystem to support cheetahs? And finally, the genetic studies, which I'll get into a lot more of in the next few slides. So all of the history of what we've done, we started out at Cosmas Conservancy, which was in the Rift Valley area near Lake Nakuru, which I don't know, how many of you have been to Kenya? A few. So Lake Nakuru is, I'll just walk over here a minute, I know that's, Lake Nakuru is basically right in this area up here. And it was on the edge of cheetah population. And when we first came in, the Kenya Wildlife Service said, we really want to reintroduce cheetahs into the Nakuru area. Can you do a study that will show us if we can reintroduce? And unfortunately, the results of that study did not produce what everybody had hoped. When land use changes to the degree that it had changed in the Nakuru region, it is going to be impossible for cheetahs to survive in the wild. However, they could survive in sanctuaries if we needed to set up sanctuaries. So once we discovered that, we said we need to look at how cheetahs are doing in the rest of the country. So we did a National Cheetah Survey that went from 2004 to 2007. And from that national survey, we were able to produce this map with the red that shows where the stronghold of cheetah populations are in the country. We started out in Salama, which is the southern part that the arrow that the Cheetah Conservation Fund goes to. And in that Salama community was currently being subdivided. The Mombasa Highway, which is the main means of transportation from the port in Mombasa into the capital city, was being developed into a multi-lane highway, and land use change was happening at a rapid pace. But there were areas where there were still strongholds of cheetahs. So we had hoped that what we would be able to do in that area would be to implement enough conservation activities that the government and the community would have buy-in to the conservation of animals like cheetahs who need large areas to move. But what we found was in that area, the land use change was happening at an almost fast, rapid pace of what it was up at the north, and it was being destroyed more rapidly than we could sustain the cheetahs. In the area where we studied, we originally had about 30 cheetahs that moved in and out and some residents in the area. And by the time we closed the project in 2020, there were only 2 cheetahs that were even passing through once a year. So we said, are we really doing good conservation work if we stay based in this particular study area? And at the same time, we were developing some projects in other areas. So up in the north, where the other area arrow points to the other breakout thing, that's the Samburu community. And Samburu is a pastoralist community. They're nomadic, so they move around. The settlements are usually not as large because people don't stay in one place for very long. The infrastructure was not as strong in place. And we knew that when we did our first National Cheetah Survey, that was one of the highest density of cheetah populations. So we said, let's relocate ourselves and move to a place where hopefully we can make a difference. So now I want to tell you where we have made a difference. Also, the other project, having partnered with the Mara Cheetah Project, another stronghold for cheetahs in Kenya is at the border of Tanzania down in the south. And there are several protected areas throughout Kenya as well. So we did at the same time need to have a better understanding of what are the differences between cheetahs outside of the parks and cheetahs inside of the parks. And so Elena's focus in the Mara project and developing into the Meru area, which is northeast a little bit, her focus is on the cheetahs that are inside of the park with borders to communities, whereas my focus is everything that is completely outside of parks. So the conservancy that we work in is called the Maibai Community Conservancy. It is about 1,150 kilometers squared. We first began doing our initial research there in 2010, and it took us a few years to raise the funds and to make a decision on where we wanted to be based. And in 2017 is when we opened our formal research base. So when I came here in 2019, we were really just getting started in this community. We hire people from within the community that we work with. I can't say we train them because we train them on science, but they train us on real life. And that's really what it's all about, is that these people are the people who are going to conserve their land. It isn't somebody like me who's going to come in and make the difference, but to give empowerment to the local communities is what we've become all about. So we had objectives of conflict mitigation, understanding cheetah status, mitigating natural resource competition. That is a lot to do with the highway development, the settlement development, and to make sure that everything that we did came back and influenced changes. So keeping a very strong relationship with the government organizations that can give us the permission to work, but also that can take the information that we have and put it into the actions that are necessary legally to make sure that cheetahs are conserved for the future. Back to the dog work. It took us a lot to be able to get permission to take the dogs into the national park for the first time. Being able to prove to them that the dogs weren't going to chase game, to prove to them that the dogs were going to be more effective than people in finding cheetah poop. We had 2.5 years of our staff going out looking for cheetah poop. They found about 300 samples. Anybody have a guess of how many turned out to be cheetah?
Less than 50.
30. So 10% success without having dogs. In the short program that we did inside of the park, which was 15 searches with 2 dogs in 60 sections in 4 locations, 60 sessions, sorry. The dogs found 90 scats. Anybody have a guess of how many of those were cheetah? 98%. That's how much more successful we can be with the dogs. So I have to thank the people who have helped us to learn how to train dogs. I've always loved dogs, so this has been kind of a dream for me anyway, to be able to work with dogs and cheetahs. So we've had a lot of consultants that have come in and helped to teach us. Again, we want to make sure we're empowering the local community people to do the work. So we had to basically kind of start from scratch with people who grow up really not liking dogs very much, to finding the right ones who wanted to work with dogs and wanted to make this work, and then learning about dog behavior to be able to do this training. And so this is a lot of what our focus was during the pandemic from 2020 to 2021, was developing a bigger team of dog handlers in order that we now are ready to start the second National Cheetah Survey. Let me go back one step a minute. Down here where it says using the Mara Cheetah Project for pedigree and testing the effectiveness of our software, what that means is that within the Masai Mara, I'm always very jealous of Elena because Elena gets to see cheetahs every day. The Masai Mara is the prime place where most tourists want to go to see cheetahs. It is the highest density per square kilometer area in Kenya of where cheetahs can, most likely 99% of tourists will see cheetahs when they go through Mara. So it made sense for her to base herself there and do family pedigree studies. So she's been following families for 10 years. And she has a map of who everybody's mother, brother, and sister are, and who we think some of their fathers are. So she feels that she has 85% of her animals that she currently has in the Masai Mara. She knows who the mother's, father's, brothers, and sisters are. So she then gets lucky enough to watch the cheetahs poop, and she's able to pick up a poop right after that particular cheetah goes, and we know 100% who that cheetah belongs to. We then used a master student from Kenya and put it into a blind test where they didn't know the label of who the cheetah was. So they isolate the cheetah genetics in the Kenya Wildlife Service lab, and then they run a pedigree study using the software that's being developed in relation to rhinos and elephants and everything else. And we look at then how we can compare the pedigree of the known cheetahs to the pedigree of what comes out of that thing. And again, we are over 90% getting the same results. So we know that our system can work where we don't see cheetahs on a regular basis. We can now actually map out not just the connectivity between cheetah populations, but where there are strongholds of cheetah populations. We can now map out who's related to who and whose mothers and fathers are breeding, and look at, similar to what zoos do, breeding coefficients, and know how much inbreeding we're having in our population. So that's the power of this dog program. At the same time, we can't just focus on the biology of cheetahs, because we know that biologically, they're breeding in every place where cheetahs have a stronghold. So we needed to focus on the community work. And in this community work, conflict is the biggest reason why people want to see predators go away. So we worked with not just our own researchers, but with South Africa, Namibia, Tanzania, other places where they have carnivore conflict mitigation going on, and we took some of their resources. We used what our team were already using in the field to give advice to people to prevent losses, and we now developed what's called a human carnivore conflict mitigation toolkit. And it's not a box of tools, it is a book of tools. And what that does is it allows any investigator into a conflict to first of all identify which predator causes the conflict, to work with that community member who has the loss, who says, I've been seeing a cheetah every day, I know the cheetah is what killed it, but what we see is that something came over the fence, climbed a tree, got in, took their goat, and took the goat out of there and carried it. Cheetahs can't do that. So how do you then convince a person that is very, very adamant that that was a cheetah, because I see a cheetah walk by here, that it wasn't a cheetah, and that addressing the right type of mitigation is going to solve your conflict? So with this toolbox, it allows the person to go and actually do a crime scene investigation with the owner of the livestock and come to a conclusion together. What animal do you think this could be? Then, on the back of the toolkit, it has what are the steps that they can take to prevent future losses. From the studies that we've done so far using this conflict mitigation toolkit, 85% of the people that we give advice to never have another conflict.
Wow.
So now what we've been doing is we've been doing trainings with other rangers in other areas and showing them how to use this toolkit, and then giving that to them through the grants that we get, similar to what you guys give us for each year that you guys give us the grants. That's the money that goes into being able to give these toolkits to other rangers in other areas so that they can use this toolkit effectively. We found that in some of the other areas, those rangers that are going out to investigate conflict have never actually even had any training on the difference between a cheetah and a leopard. And so when we do the beginning of the training, we always do a pre-survey, and we have photographs of different animals. So they tell us, what animal is this? We do it with tracks so that they also, because a lot of times you don't actually see the animal, you see the tracks. And then the third element of that is looking at killing style and eating style. And so we test them at the beginning of what they think caused the problem. And we run little scenarios that we've now got our staff become really good actors and actresses. Some of them become very obstinate in how they're like, I know it was this animal. And they try to convince the person who's doing the investigation that it's something that we know it's not. So we've had our staff get chased by machetes with people who are adamant that we need to pay them for their lost livestock. So we want our staff to play those roles when they do the training of other people, so that they also know that you're not alone in how you're addressing conflicts. Let me go back here again. A part of this toolbox also included the use of deterrent lights. And I think for any of you who might have heard my talks before, we were just initiating this. We started in 2015. So in 2019, when I was here last, we hadn't gotten any results of this. We've been trying out two different types of lights. One is called a lion elephant deterrent light, which is the top one, and it's migrated to a much nicer one than that. But that was our prototype with the designer. And then the fox lights are something that comes from Australia and is used for sheep, wolf, and bear conflicts. So we tested those two using scientific methodology, camera traps, transects looking for tracks, investigating the livestock losses itself. And now we're just finishing up writing a series of papers on perceived versus actual effectiveness, cost effectiveness of using deterrent lights, and is it going to be worth turning your community into a disco with having all the flashing lights to have enough of livestock loss reduction? And the answer is yes. It's very cost effective. It's saving people thousands of dollars to have this system in place. So that's been a part of what we're putting into this conflict mitigation toolkit. The problem that we're having is nobody wants to spend money on the lights. And once the lights are up, they just call us and say, my light's broken. And so the training has to include, how do you fix what's yours? And how do you continue to spend a small amount of money to save a large amount of money? So that's our current challenge in working with the community now, is putting in that level of personal responsibility for protecting your livestock. One thing we often tell people is, when you build a house, you put a door on your house and you put a lock and a key that goes with that house. So a human who thinks about what they're breaking in to do is stopped from breaking into your house. You have predators out here who just want to survive. They just want to eat. They just want to feed their family. And if you don't put a lock and key around what belongs to you, that predator doesn't know they're stealing from you, compared to a human who knows they're stealing. So we try to approach it from that kind of an emotional level for them too, especially when you start talking about families, we start talking about family life of the predators as well, and help people to understand what a predator has to do to survive with its family. A more difficult element of the studies that we do is looking at the conflict with infrastructure development, linear development. Luckily, there's a lot of partners in Kenya that we work with on this. I had a master's student who looked at the Mombasa Highway. We've had 24 cheetahs killed on Mombasa Highway alone. And that's where we have an extremely low density of cheetahs. Up in the north, where the highways are going in, we've worked together with the Iwasa Lions, Grubby Zebra Trust, Save the Elephants, and the Giraffe Foundation to try to see if we can get the corridors to be addressed by the developers, so that where they put the roads is going to have a minimum impact. The road was designed to go right through the center of Grubby Zebra birthing area. That was going to be the road, that was going to be a railway, that was going to be a pipeline, that was going to be lots of new developments happening. With us all working together and putting all of our information into one pool, and then approaching the right people at these institutions and telling them, we're not telling you we don't want development, we're telling you that we want sustainable development. Tourists come to this area because this is where 75% of the Grubby zebras live. And tourists aren't going to come here anymore if you don't have Grubby zebra. So through our efforts, we were able to get an entire government organization and all the planners to move that road 40 kilometers away. But it's only through partnerships that we work on. So we have to continue collecting very scientifically based information in order to continue to be able to have that kind of impact. And so those are some of the students that we support as well. The final element that we're addressing is the disease element. When also back around 2015, I can't help but pet a dog if I see a dog. I love dogs. So if a dog approaches me and a dog is friendly, I pet that dog. There was a puppy of maybe about 6 or 7 months old that approached me and was really friendly, and I was petting him, and then he became a little playful. So I kind of tugged on his ears a little bit, and that dog suddenly turned and bit me. And it was out in a community manyatta, a local livestock area. And I didn't really think anything of it. I've had a rabies vaccine. I know that if you get bitten, even when you have a rabies vaccine, you go get a booster. You have 7 to 10 days to go do that. I was heading back to Nairobi, so I'm like, I'll just get a booster. And I said to one of my staff members, but you know, all of these dogs are vaccinated, right? He went, who vaccinates dogs? So I thought, wow, that's not so good. And I found that, you know, even none of my staff were vaccinating their dogs. And then I did a little more research into Kenya and found out that 2,000 people die in Kenya per year from rabies. And that 60% of those are children under the age of 15. 95% of the dog bites, or of the rabies cases, come from dog bites. So I thought, I think we need to start a vaccination campaign. And I found out that our Vision 2030 for Kenya included the fact that they want to have all dogs in Kenya be vaccinated and want to get that implemented. And I thought, well, I can help with that in our little area. So we started vaccinating dogs against rabies in 2017. And in early part of 2018, we had about 60 dogs suddenly die. The community came kind of raiding to our camp and said, why are you killing our dogs? Is it because our dogs chase your cheetahs away? What are you trying to do? You're killing our dogs. And I'm like, these vaccinations, this was months ago. If it was gonna kill your dogs, it would have killed your dogs right after the vaccination. I didn't think that it was rabies. So we then, or I didn't think it was a result of our vaccine. So we called in the veterinary county and KWS and other private friends of mine, and we were able to collect samples and find out we had the same distemper outbreak that was happening in Laikipia and had completely wiped out all but one wild dog in their entire population. So we had a big distemper outbreak going on here. So the next step is, how are we going to add to our vaccination campaign to increase the survival of people's dogs, to decrease the transmission, not just of rabies to people, but of distemper into wildlife and other domestic animals as well. So that was our next step, is that we added distemper. We partnered with Iwaso Lions, who were finding the same thing happening with distemper in their community. The first year that we did the vaccination campaign, we vaccinated only 785 animals. And by 2021, the final vaccine that we did, I haven't fixed that number, but we vaccinated almost 4,000. And so our goal is to continue doing that. We did a study and found out that we were actually only vaccinating about 45% of the dogs in our study area. In order to eradicate rabies, you have to vaccinate 70%. So our studies now are looking at the migratory routes of the people with their dogs. So we're putting radio collars on domestic dogs to look at their interaction with each other and with the community. We also found that the average age of a dog in these communities is only 4 years old. And a dog at only 4 years old is not going to protect your livestock as well as a dog at 6 or 7 years old who's really bonded to your family. So our goal has been to try to work within these communities to find out culturally what's acceptable and how can we improve the dog care within these communities as well. One way was also that we knew that there was a high amount of puppies coming into us. So we were only getting about 25% of the dogs vaccinated in previous years were coming back another year. And we need to raise that up quite a bit. So sterilizations is the next element of that we want to develop people getting dogs that they're going to keep for a longer period of time. And so we partnered with something called TNR Trust, which is Trap, Neuter, Release. They worked mostly in Nairobi at that time in doing programs of sterilizations there. So they're now working with us to do these vaccinations. We're also partnering with the International Livestock Research Institute to look at how much of our dog population has titers against these diseases. So going into this next strategic planning period with the other researchers, what we're proposing is that we still have huge gaps in the habitat loss and fragmentation, which definitely impacts some of these lower things as well. And if we address that, we will be addressing a lot of the lower ones, but road accidents, live trade, we believe all that needs to move up. I haven't really talked so much, and I think I'm kind of running out of time because I'm very long-winded today. But addition to all of this that's going on, we work together with the Cheetah Conservation Fund on their program in Somaliland, where right now they have 85 cheetahs in very poor quality enclosures, but they have been given by the Somaliland government a new acreage of land to build a cheetah sanctuary. Those 85 cheetahs that they have now are 50% of what's been confiscated in the last 4 years. They come in to that facility dehydrated, very sick, starving because they've been taken away from their mother, and they immediately get super sick and need a lot of medical care to get them back up to health. And then once they're healthy, the continuous care that they're going to need. These cheetahs are not right now targeted for any kind of reintroduction because immediately when they come into these facilities, they're getting exposed to FIP. And if anybody knows anything about FIP, once a cat has it, anytime that cat is stressed, it will shed the virus again. So therefore it would infect the wild population. So those cubs that are coming into the Somaliland facility right now, their life in captivity. So the work that we do in Kenya helps to try to prevent the trade from going in there. In the case that we can address the health issue and reduce the FIP infection rate, and be able to try to reintroduce cheetahs back into the wild. Both us and CCF and in Ethiopia and South Sudan, there are researchers looking at where cheetahs could potentially be released. But we now have another conflict here in that the Somaliland government is not recognized as an independent government. Somalia still has basically legal control of Somaliland, but Somaliland operates independently and will not accept Somalia as its ruling party. So therefore, getting any cheetahs out of Somaliland, you have to have permission from Somalia for the other countries to recognize getting them, and Somalia says, no, we will never release those cheetahs. So right now, all that we can do in Somaliland is to do the best we can to care for the cheetahs that we're getting, to try to work to continue having the confiscation so that these cubs are not getting up into the Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia where they're being traded to, and to try to make sure that we're identifying where those cheetahs are coming from in the first place. So this is the circle that I'm coming back to. Our genetic work will allow us to have a mirror database with all of the other governments that are working on endangered species trade, so that where those cubs are coming from, we can now do more enforcement in the areas of where they're coming from, or better yet, more conservation efforts with the community to stop them from being a part of the trade in the first place. So it's addressing the illegal trade on multiple levels. I believe very strongly in the empowerment of our local communities and making sure that the Kenyans are the ones who are running this project. And in doing so, we currently have 21 employees, and they're all Kenyans. I'm the only non-Kenyan employee. We've had 2 PhD students who have completed their PhD with us now, and one that is in her PhD program. We've had 17 master's students. About half of those are non-Kenyan, and the other half are Kenyan. Part of the reason for taking non-Kenyan master's students is that master's students can come with their own funding, mostly when they come from other countries. But when we take the Kenyan students, they have to be funded completely. Their tuition, their study, their accommodation, everything needs to be funded. It's more difficult for them to get individual student grants. We've had 31 college internships, about half Kenyan, about half not. Our volunteers that come in are volunteers from docent pool, from students that are trying to figure out where they want to be for the rest of their lives, people who are retired who want to come in and make a difference in the end. So we've taken about 50 volunteers. Obviously that stopped during the COVID time period, and that was a good source of income, what funded the other students. We visited primary and secondary schools and reached over 30,000 primary and secondary students. The gal at the bottom here is Adelaide. Adelaide did her undergraduate degree with us as an intern, and we helped her to get the funding to go to Australia to do her master's degree in climate change. So she's one of my people I'm proud of right now. On the other side, the 2 girls on that side, Noreen is the one doing her PhD on this National Cheetah Survey stuff. And Sarah, I think she came with us here before. Some of you might have met her. Sarah did her master's degree at Yale, following a little in my footsteps, and is now doing her own environmental consulting business. So we're not just empowering them to work with us, we're empowering them to be leaders in conservation in their home country. And I feel really strongly that these are the future of conservation. So what can you guys do to help? That's the way we need to end this. First of all, when you purchase these cool crafts, you not only help to fund our project, but you fund the communities that we work with. All of the products that are on this table are made in Kenya by community groups that I work with. Secondly, the balls themselves, the soccer balls that are over there, every soccer ball that gets purchased, 1 ball gets donated to one of the schools that we work with, and for our International Cheetah Day event as well. Traveling with us is another way that you can help. Come see what we do, come be active with what we do. Shawnee can account to that too. And so Tani, sorry, I did that all the time that you were there too. So yeah, our travel program, Jay is leading a program in May that's coming out there. We also have a little bit more of kind of a keeper oriented, which is going to be a longer period of time with us. Jay's is a safari family and an extension that will come and spend some time with us. And then the one in November next year people will spend a total of almost a week at our camp doing a project with us. So you can talk more to Jay and more to me. We've got some brochures out here about the travel program as well. In general, reducing your waste, reusing materials, and recycling materials is something everybody can do anytime. Donating your time and your funds to work with conservation projects like us, especially projects that work closely with communities. Learn more about conservation and share that information with other people. So I want to say thank you to Hogle Zoo and all of the support that they've continued to give us. Without the kind of support that you guys give, we wouldn't have made it through the pandemic. And so I want to say thanks especially for that as well. I think I can get somebody to put the lights back on. I can answer any questions. And even while I'm chatting and people want to start shopping, Jay can start bringing stuff up. Yes.
So have you had any success talking to the Canyon Road people about doing those wildlife corridors?
Yes, that's a part of the solutions that we're trying to get across. Right now, there are 2 places in Kenya that have an underpass. One of them was done through Lewa and Save the Elephants for an elephant corridor, and another one is being done in relationship to the railway around Lasabo National Park. Yeah. So, and speed bumps and signs. It was hard to get permission to put signs up. The government doesn't like to give people signs unless you pay major money for them. So, yeah.
Mary, you didn't mention anything about poisoning, either intentional or incidental. Is poisoning much of an impact?
Poisoning is not so much of an impact on the cheetah itself, because cheetahs eat what they kill and they don't go for carrion. But once a cheetah or another animal makes a kill, the poisoning affects the vultures, the lions, the hyenas very drastically. So we do have a partner in the Peregrine Fund who works really closely with Lion Landscapes and Lion Guardians. And they come in and give talks to our community with a regular basis about not using poisons. Not so much because it does actually impact cheetahs, but because it impacts the entire ecosystem. Yeah.
On the rabies vaccine, are you doing a 3-year and are you having to booster that, or are people following that?
So we've only been doing this campaign now since 2017. And we are giving the vaccines every year.
So it's just a 1-year vaccine.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if you were having people follow that.
It's been hard to get people to sometimes come back, and also some dogs just can't be caught the second time. So the one we are using is one that can continue coverage for up to 3 years, and that's why with ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute, we're looking at titers. So we want to see what kind of titers they have if they've never been vaccinated but are born in that area, if they've had 1 or more vaccinations in the past. It's going to be, when we do the rabies campaign this year in November after I get back, we will be collecting the first set of samples. Then we collect samples at 30 days, samples at 60 days, at 6 months, and at 1 year. So that will tell us whether we're reaching 70% effectiveness on our vaccines or not.
If you're not, have you guys explored bait for getting those dogs that you can't?
Most of these are not feral dogs out in there. They are dogs that are kind of owned by people. But no, we've not explored bait, but what we are looking at, the Owasso Lions got the funding for a mobile veterinary clinic, which we're looking again at the comparison between the mass vaccination campaigns and a mobile veterinary clinic. So they've been in operation for 1 year where they're going around and giving vaccinations more regularly and also going out for calls of emergencies with not just domestic pets, but livestock as well. So building that relationship. So when we do the titer collection, the Owasso Lions group is also going to collect titers at the same time. They are adding in the mass vaccination campaign to their mobile clinic this year, specifically so that we can collect this data and look at the differences after 1 year of having a mobile vet clinic. And if so, I'm going to be seeking large money for a mobile vet clinic. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Oh, one more thing.
How do you select the dogs? Are they specific breed there or?
The dogs for the scat dogs. So Maddie is a mixed breed dog who belonged to a friend of mine whose Rottweiler and Border Collie both had a strong play drive. And she said, my puppies are already, barely walking and they're running around with balls and rocks in their mouth. I think these dogs might be good. So Maddie just had the right drive. We tried to do what Working Dogs for Conservation does and go to the local Humane Society, which is called the Kenya Society for the Protection of Animals. We went there and took unwanted dogs from there that we found with play drive, and those dogs are kind of too mentally messed up. It was really hard. We ended up rehoming all of those dogs that they worked in the beginning, but they just lose their attention really fast. Part of it might have been our skills didn't exist, but part of it is when we consulted with Megan about what you do at a certain point when you give up on the dog, she's like, these dogs aren't going to work. But she also didn't think Maddie would work, and Maddie's working great. So maybe as our team grows a little bit more, we can possibly go back to looking at rehoming dogs. But the Percy and her sister, we got 2 together that were donated, pure Belgian Malinois. Oh my goodness, they are fantastic. They're called Maligators for a reason. And we had to learn a whole different way of training dogs when we started working with them because of their strong drive. And Maddie and Percy make a really good team. Unfortunately, Artie died of tick bite fever earlier in 2022, a really hard thing to go through, to watch a dog suffer from that and die. But yeah, that's kind of a part of what we have to get through. So right now we have just the 2 dogs, and when we get ready to take on some more dogs for the program, the same guy that donated Percy to us has offered to donate 2 more dogs. So that will be very helpful as well. Cool. That's wonderful.
The Distemper vaccine you guys are using, or are you using a multivariant that will do as well?
So the first 2 years when we bought it, we used DHLPP, but we're getting it donated now from another organization studying distemper in Tanzania, and it's just the puppy one with just distemper and parvo, I think, so just DP. Thanks, Chuck.